Actually, it's the only profession I know of where women make more money than men. And look, I would never tell somebody, yeah, quit your daytime job, start trying to act full time without any experience. I mean, that just isn't smart advice. But if it's something that interests you and you want to check it out and something you finally want to do for yourself, you want to give yourself something that you've been thinking about all your life, but you've been doing things for other people. Now's the time to do it. Don't wait. People don't want to work with desperate people. They want to work with people who feel confident. There are a lot of people out there who might discourage you, people who might tell you what you're thinking and wanting to do, no matter what it is. They're going to say you're nuts. And if it doesn't work out for you, that's okay. Because then you did everything you possibly could, and then you can move on to something else in your life without having any regrets.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Stories and Stanza. And with me, I have Aaron today, who is a writer, actor, acting coach, and we are going to explore a lot of interesting things in today's episode. Hi, Aaron, and welcome to Stories and Stanza.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really excited about being here with you.
I am really excited to have you here, and my podcast, Stories and Stanza, it is mostly for writers and authentic stories that I try to capture here. And I invite writers to join me and share their craft with the audience as to what inspired them into writing and how did they progress their writing, what were the challenges as such. But today I believe we will be talking about a lot more with the world of acting and modeling that you have worked so far and teach as well. So is there anything you'd like to say to the audience before we get started?
No, I'm good. Just to let people know if they're not familiar with any of my work, I've been doing this full time for a little over 40 years. And like you said, I'm an actor. I do private sessions. I do workshops. Matter of fact, I've been to Sydney a couple times doing workshops. And I also have a really helpful website. It's howtoactandmodel.com. And it's when people sign up there, it's all free. I send out information to people because, and this goes along with writing the book as well, it's my way of giving back to the community. And it was, I don't know how it has been for other writers or people who listen to the podcast, but getting started was very difficult for me. And it took me a while, and I didn't have connections. It's not like I grew up in this industry, pretty far from it. And so I knew from an early age that if I ever had success, I'd want to share it with other people. That's just how I was brought up, not compete with others, but actually give them information and have a community, worldwide community of actors, or it could be writers, people just helping each other and learning from each other. And to me, it seems like a good way that I've been running my business for a long time. And it's also been a good way that I've lived my life as well.
That is wonderful. And what you said about giving back to the society, that's precisely what inspired me to start this podcast. And we talk to writers, and also there is a section called Fail With Me where we look at life's failures in light of mental health and wellness and other things. And I personally feel that ever since I started doing this podcast, talking to my guests, it has enriched me in a way that I wouldn't be able to if I hadn't take this plunge and started the podcast. So it's been a very fulfilling experience, and I thank you for what you are doing in your professional career and sharing that knowledge with others. That's so important.
Thank you.
So, to get started, could you briefly tell us about the book first, and
Sure.
then we will look at maybe request you to read something from the book.
Sure. So let me just tell you. So this is the second book that I wrote. The very first book was called How to Become a Successful Commercial Model. For people who aren't familiar with commercial modeling, and most people aren't, you know what it is, but you just don't know the name of it. Essentially, there are two types of modeling in this world. So there's fashion modeling, and that's what most people are familiar with. Fashion models are actually, it's the only profession I know of where women make more money than men. And I'm not, look, I live in the States, so my math is not very good. So I can't do conversions for you. So I'll have to do things in inches and feet. Sorry. And so I'm talking about like supermodels. I'm not talking about somebody who might just do a local modeling show and do a runway there, but supermodels, they are going to be for women, they're going to be between 5'9", 5 feet 9 inches to 6 feet tall. Their measurements are going to be 34, 24, 34. And you have to have a very specific look. For guys, it's going to be 6 feet to 6 feet 2, and you're going to wear a size 40 jacket. Could be a 40 long, but it's a 40 jacket. Now, there's a whole other world of modeling out there that has nothing to do with fashion, which is what I've been doing for many years. And it's called commercial modeling. And commercial modeling runs the gamut from infants, you know, month-old babies to people in their 80s. Essentially, if you're breathing, you could be considered as a commercial model. And you see us everywhere, magazines and newspapers and brochures, on billboards and posters, on sides of buses and things like that. And there's no age restriction like there is in the fashion world. So my first book was How to Become a Successful Commercial Model. And what I found was the industry was changing a lot. So I actually went through 6 editions. I was also, fortunately, I was selling out of each one. And then I was thinking, you know what? This is old. I need to update this. So I went through 6 editions. And then at one point, I just decided, you know what? I really want to expand this because there's a lot more for me to talk about. And so I wrote another book, and it's called How to Become a Successful Actor and Model. And so I still have a component of commercial modeling in there, but there's a whole, like half the book is acting as well. And the way that it came about, at least the original book, was I was asked by an agent if I would come in and talk to her actors and models about commercial modeling because she knew that I booked a lot and I wasn't getting paid anything and it was about 3 hours away from me. But I thought, you know what? It might be fun for me to do it. And I like the agent and I think it would be a nice thing to do. So put together an hour talk and went down. It was, like I said, it was about 3 hours away from me. And I gave a workshop, my very first workshop. And I thought, you know what, this was really fun. And then I found I really have a whole lot more to say. And then I started getting lots of phone calls from people asking me questions about the industry. And I was more than happy to answer the questions that I got. But what I was finding was that there was so much more that I wanted to share with people that I simply couldn't spend 6 hours every day on the phone just answering questions for people. So that really was the impetus for me writing my very first book. And so for me, it's a way of sharing my experiences, good and bad, and things that work for me, things that don't work for me. And it's in book form. And one of the things that I always make really clear to people, you know, whether it's at a workshop, I also do a lot of private virtual coaching sessions as well. Everything that I say to people, including what's in my book, these are just things that work for me. I'm not saying this is the only way to do things. This is how you have to do it if you want to have success. And I know there are people in the world that do that. And maybe they actually feel that. I don't. And it's just like a million years ago, I used to be a musician. And I studied classical guitar in school, and there was a certain technique that I learned. And I remember I would go out and listen to other classical guitarists, and I went with some fellow classmates, and I would say, hey, so what did you think of the performance? And they said, well, the performance was okay, but did you see how his wrist was kind of bent to the side? Very different than the technique we were being taught. And I remember looking at them and saying, who cares? I don't care if the person was playing with his feet. It doesn't make any difference. What was the music like? Did it move you? Did it take you somewhere? And so I feel the same way about our industry, the acting and modeling industry. I don't know, it doesn't make any difference what technique you use. If you don't, look, there are some very famous actors who will say, just say the lines, just say the words. That's all you need to do. And then other people have different methods that they use and they adapt the character from birth when they build this whole story. Whatever works for you is great. So anyhow, so everything in the book, it has helped hundreds and hundreds of people. And it's a great way to avoid the pitfalls that I did and save yourself years of trial and error. Because even if you are a very talented actor and you've taken lots of great classes and you really know what you're doing, acting wise, it doesn't mean necessarily mean anything as far as having success. Because I know that like I've done workshops and I've had people from major acting schools attend my workshop. And sometimes they'll tell me, we're really talented, but most of us aren't getting any work. And so you really need to understand the intricacies of the business in order to have success. A lot of things that just aren't taught in school. So anyhow, I know that was a long-winded way of getting around to talking about why I wrote the book, but it's a way for me to help other people and really share what I've learned in the 40 plus years I've been doing this work.
That is wonderful. And there are a lot of unknowns, and these are creative people. So the bridge between creative identity and the commercial success, there is a gray area, and I believe that your book is doing a wonderful job guiding people in that space. And for our audience, can I request you to share anything from your book, like read anything from your
Yeah,
book? Yeah.
absolutely. Hey, I'm going to find a little section that I think will be really helpful. So this is really towards the end. Let's see. Okay, here's a nice little spot. So is acting and modeling for you? And I go on to talk about how I truly love my work. And there are aspects of the business that I don't always like. It can be demoralizing, frustrating, frightening, and stressful. It can also be exhilarating and wonderful and an extremely rewarding profession. And as in any job, there are no guarantees. But the more knowledgeable and skilled you are, and the harder you work, the greater the chances are of achieving success. And when I began, I decided not to have any specific goals for my first year. I just wanted to experience the work and the lifestyle to see how it felt. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have goals, but before goals are set, first find out if acting and modeling is something you really enjoy. Make sure that an uncertain income is something you and perhaps your spouse and family can handle. And most important, make sure you love the work. So there's a lot more I can take out of here, but if that says what you want, then
Yes, it does say that. And I know a lot of people, it's not just acting and modeling per se, but they get into the deep end of a career and they don't realize whether they want it or not. So I think that's the crux of it. Doesn't have to be being an actor. It kind of flows on to many other professions.
absolutely. And you bring up a really good point. What I just read for you, it's universal. In some ways, it has nothing to do with acting and modeling. It has to do with anybody who has a thought, whether you want to be a writer, a filmmaker, like you were saying, anything creative. If it's something you want to do, first of all, make sure that you're really well trained at it and you've worked hard. I think this is a good example. I remember one time there were there were a couple of extras in a movie. And this happens sometimes for whatever reason. The director said, "Hey, look, when this star walks by you, I want you to say good morning." Okay. So for whatever reason, and all of a sudden they just got upgraded. They went from being an extra, now they are a principal. And I was talking with one of the people, and I said, "Hey, first of all, congratulations. That's excellent." And he said, "Yeah, this is great. You know what? I think I'm going to move to LA." I said, "Well, this is your first job, right?" And he goes, "Yeah, but look, I just got upgraded. Apparently people," and I would never tell somebody not to do that, but I was just thinking, you don't know what you're doing. And to jump into an industry without any training, without having any contacts, without having any representation, and you're going to try to go to one of the biggest markets in the world and try to break in there. If you want to open up a restaurant, you should really have some experience working in the kitchen or working in the dining room area. You don't just say, "Hey, I want to open a restaurant," and then open a restaurant without any kind of background. So I think for anybody, I think that's a really wise decision to look into it, study, get as much knowledge as you can, and test things out. Make sure, like I was saying, for anybody who's self-employed, it can be really hard when you are dependent on getting a job, whether you are an independent plumber or an electrician, it doesn't make any difference. And if you don't have a job coming up and you've got bills to pay, that can make life really stressful. So, anyhow, check it out very carefully, but also don't give up on something that interests you. Because I do run into a lot of people who will tell me, "Oh, I've always wanted to be an actor. I've always wanted to be a model. And I couldn't do it before. And I was raising kids and I was busy. I was in school, I had a full-time job, and I couldn't do it. And now I don't know. Now I'm just not at a good place." What it really comes down to is a lot of people don't have the courage to follow their dreams. And look, I would never tell somebody, "Yeah, quit your daytime job, start trying to act full time without any experience." I mean, that just isn't smart advice. But if it's something that interests you and you want to check it out and something you finally want to do for yourself, you want to give yourself something that you've been thinking about all your life, but you've been doing things for other people, now's the time to do it. Don't wait. And the worst thing that can happen is you don't have the success that you want. And look, that doesn't feel good. I understand. When you don't book the job, it doesn't feel good. When you don't get the representation with the agent, it doesn't feel good. But I can tell you from personal experience, if you don't try it, you're going to be haunted for the rest of your life. And once again, it's just like for people who want to write a book. "Oh, yeah, I've got all these great ideas." And they talk about it and they share it. But there's a difference between that and actually writing the words. And then once you get all that done, then you're talking about publishing, you're talking about getting it printed and how you're going to do that and how are you going to market this thing. And so there's a lot more involved with that. But if it's something there that interests you, please go and follow your dreams.
That is so perfectly said because I remember I wanted to write from a very long time and I knew that I wanted to write, but that was not what I got educated in or what my professional career was. So I had this often on sentiment about whether should I should take the plunge and write it and not. And then I wrote my first book and then I felt that it's not worth publishing and I threw it away. and
Oh,
and then years later I thought about publishing again and then I was able to dig out what I had written and then it got polished and all and then it became a book. And then my
wow.
second book happened. So I feel that if I don't take the first step, then I don't get to like any other sort of advancements from there. And now I know what I want to write next. So I have got a very clear pathway of what I want to write next. And that satisfaction, it's not comparable with anything else in the world, I believe. And I say this to many of my writer friends as well. And it's that satisfaction, what you're referring to, I think it's priceless. It's not something that can be compared with any other happiness in the world.
Yeah. And look, there might be some people in this world who might say, you know what? I just want to write for myself. I really don't have an interest in publishing. I really don't care if other people want to read it. I just want to write because it's going to make me feel good. I enjoy the process, and that's fine. And that's absolutely fine. Look, it's just like sometimes I've taken acting classes, and there are people in the class who never go out on auditions. They just don't have the interest, or maybe they don't have the courage. For whatever reason, I just happen to know these people are full-time class takers, and that's what they do. And if that fulfills what you need in life, that's great. Not everybody has to go out and audition, and not everybody has to go out and try to publish. So it really depends on what you're trying to get out of things. But I just want to say to you, congratulations. To write something and then feel like it's not worthy and put it down, and then years later you come back to it and get it published. That's really phenomenal.
Thank you. So, to proceed with some of the queries I had, the first thing I'm very curious to know about, and this is something I ask every writer who has joined me so far, but I'm not talking about writing per se, but you also teach acting, like you take classes and workshops and everything. What, according to you, is the hardest thing to teach in this area?
Wow. I guess I would have to say, and just so people know, I do workshops, I do private sessions, but I'm not a school or anything like that. So I just didn't want people to have the wrong idea here. I would probably say one of the things that's very hard is for people to listen and respond. I find that sometimes people have like a certain idea in their head as to how they want to read their lines. And it's like almost as if it doesn't matter what the person says back to you. That's a hard one for some people. And the other thing too is making things sound conversational. And actually, let me just jump for 1 second. For TV commercials, which is a unique kind of acting in some ways, one of the biggest problems I find with actors who are trying to learn how to audition for TV spots is they have the wrong idea about TV commercials. And their thought is this, and I understand it, it makes sense. And by the way, these are things that took me years and years and years to figure out and learn. But you think, okay, I'm reading for a TV commercial. So what's the purpose? The purpose is to sell a product. That's why they're going to pay actors to help promote a product or a company or a service, whatever it is. And so they're selling it. And yes, there are a few exceptions to the rule, but most of the commercials that you see, it's not up to the actor to sell anything. It's up to the actor to say the words, to once again, listen to what somebody says and respond to it, but make everything conversational. If I'm doing a TV commercial, I don't know, for coffee, and I'm just screaming, this coffee, it's great. I love this coffee. Who talks like that? We were talking about, yeah, I just had some coffee this morning and it was really good. I really liked it. You're talking to somebody. You're not the pitch man. You're not selling something. And once again, there are some exceptions where somebody is selling, but for the most part. So that I would say that's probably one of the hardest things because it's so ingrained in people's brains and it's counterintuitive when you think, yeah, it's a TV commercial selling your product, but I'm not there to sell.
That's very interesting. I am reading a book, and what you said, it just reminded me of something that I read there is when we can truly listen, it solves most of our problems. Just
That's interesting.
saying that we go into a problem and then we try to talk out of it. But instead of that, if we listen, then in most cases, then that problem can be resolved.
And, and the other part of that, because that's such a beautiful statement, if you're doing a scene with somebody, you might have some preconceived ideas as to what you want to do with your character. What does your character want to get out of the scene? Is there anything preventing your character from getting there? But if all of a sudden the person you're doing the scene with completely changes their reaction, then you've got to just drop everything that you were thinking of before and follow them. This is what's going on in this particular scene. And so, yeah, it's really listening to the other person is essential.
There's something that you touched upon, and what I have in mind to hear from you kind of relates to what you already mentioned is that a lot of times that someone trying to pursue this the world of acting and modeling as a career, they don't necessarily understand what it takes, and they do not understand whether they truly want it or not. And what I want to get to is handling failures and acceptance, which I believe is a big part of the domain. But before we get to that, I wanted to hear from you as to what do you think some of those misconceptions are that we can address? If we can address them, probably handling the failures and acceptance would become easier. So it's
Yeah.
basically two questions, but I think they kind of, in a way, they relate to one another.
Yeah. So let me start with the first part, and then you might have to remind me about the second part in case I forget it. But major misconception. People have the impression that whoever gives the best audition is going to get the part. People think that auditioning, it's like the Olympics. Whoever skates the cleanest, whoever doesn't fall on the ground, whoever does all the spinning in the perfect way, they're the ones who are going to score the 10 from the judges. And that's just not reality. The reality is, look, you have to give a good audition. You can't be horrible and think you're going to book the job. It has to be interesting. You have to physically look right for the role in order for that to happen. But then it comes down to other factors that has nothing to do with your audition. And maybe you're too tall for the role. Maybe you're not tall enough. Maybe you're too attractive for this particular role. Maybe you're not attractive enough. Maybe your body is in too good of shape. Maybe it's not in good enough shape. Or, and I'm not being crazy here, and I've heard of this happening. Maybe you remind the director of his ex-wife who he can't stand, and he just doesn't want to deal with it. So understanding that you could give a great audition, the audition of your life, and you're still probably not going to book the job just because there are too many factors. And these factors are out of your control. And I know I'm kind of wandering a little bit here, but there was a TV show and it was called House of Cards. And it was the very first streaming television show that the Netflix put together. They put up money for 2 seasons. They didn't even shoot a pilot, which is normally done. And I auditioned for that show 14 times over 2 years. And I would audition. Sometimes they would say, "Oh, would you hold these dates?" Loved the audition, didn't book it. Sometimes I would get a call back, meaning they liked the audition. Now they want me to read again. Instead of just reading with the casting director, now I might be reading for the director, writers, producers, could be a lot of people in the room. And it was the 15th audition where I booked a recurring role. So, yeah, I was giving auditions that they liked, but for whatever reason, I wasn't the perfect person for it. It's almost like I didn't fit the clothes the best. So it's just really important. And I think that's a major misconception that, well, whoever does the best audition, they're the winners. And that's not the case. Then the second part, if I remember it correctly, and tell me if I had this right, dealing with rejection. Is that what
Yes.
you're?
Yeah.
Okay. So once again, I can talk about it pretty easily and freely right now. This was very hard for me. And once again, years of dealing with this and not always in a positive way. But here's what I learned, and I think it's invaluable. When we're auditioning for a role, essentially we're salespeople, just like for a writer. When you're trying to get your book published, you're a salesperson and you're making pitches to publishing companies. And what I eventually learned is that you can't take anything personally. You didn't book the job. Okay, it feels bad if you wanted it badly, but it's not a personal statement about you. If you're a good person, you're still a good person. And just like with a writer who's trying to pitch their book and you don't get it, there once again, there's so many factors, and these are just business decisions. Maybe they feel they've got too many books on your topic already. Maybe they don't think that they have a audience that's right for what you're writing. They might really like it, but it's just not the right one. And maybe, and I know you didn't ask about ways of dealing with it and solutions, but I'm just going to jump in there. If you want me to hold off, I can hold off, but this seems like the right time. Here's something that I do. And once again, everybody has a different method and everybody has a different system. This is what works for me. And that's what I'll say. Look, some people like to visualize when they go to an audition beforehand, they are seeing themselves on the red carpet. They are walking up the steps when their name is announced to get the Academy Award. They're thinking about what they're going to say in their speech, their acceptance speech. And essentially, it's almost like they're manifesting everything. And I tried that one time, and it was a horrible experience for me. It did not work. So I have a very different approach. And hopefully, this is something that others will take in and maybe it will be helpful to them as well. When I go and I'm auditioning, I truly do not believe I'm going to book the job. And I'm not saying that because I'm a negative human being. I hate myself. I'm not any good. Nobody likes me. There's no way anybody would. It's not that. I'm just being realistic here. And I understand, just like what I said before. Yes, you have to give a really good and interesting audition, and you have to look right for the part, but there are too many other factors that are out of your control. So, my number one goal for every audition, because I'm not even thinking about booking the job because I know I'm not going to get it. My number one goal for every audition is to enjoy myself. It's a Tuesday morning. I get a chance to act. I get a chance to pretend. I get a chance to play. I get a chance to be in some other space in a character. That is fun. It might only be 2 minutes. It might be a 3-minute audition. But in that time period, I'm really enjoying myself. That's my goal. And I also truly believe when you go in there with that kind of frame of mind, casting directors, as will publishers, will see you as someone that they like being around. They won't see you as needy and desperate. If you go into and make a pitch to a publisher and you're thinking, oh, this is a big publishing company, this could change my life. I'm going to sell millions of books with this. People don't want to work with desperate people. They want to work with people who feel confident and have this thought of, hey, you pick up my book, great. If you don't, that's fine. I'll find somebody else. Or you want to cast me in this role? Okay, I'd love to do it. And if not, that's fine. I'll find something else. That's the way I go into auditions. And I find that to be incredibly helpful. And by the way, it also calms me down a lot as well, because I'm not putting that added pressure on myself of having to book the job.
That is very beautifully said. And as I was telling you that we have a section in the podcast where we talk about failures, as in I call that section "Fail with Me," and this what you said just kind of fits very much with that theme as well. And we fail at so many things, and we are wired in a way that we think the negative first, that this is not going to work out, this is not right, and things like that. And we get lost in that world, and which is where the desperation comes. Right? And then,
Yeah.
if we think that it is okay to fail as much as it is okay to succeed, then there is no right or wrong way about it. And then it happens, it happens. It doesn't, then just you enjoyed at least that part.
Yeah, but you also said something that's very really interesting for me too. See, the way that I would view it, and maybe it's just semantic. See, I don't view that as a failure. It just didn't happen. It didn't happen for me. I didn't fail. I worked really hard at this audition. I spent a lot of time. I was thinking about what I wanted to do. I had a good time. That's not failure. I did everything that I wanted to do and I succeeded. Now, the end result didn't happen for me,
Mm.
but I guess for me, what I would view as a failure if I didn't prepare, I didn't do my homework, I didn't practice. I sent in a horrible audition. Technically, it looked bad. Everything looked dark. I had like a background like this, which I would never, ever do. I have a green screen on the other side of my home office. To me, that would be a failure. And I'm the one who failed in there because I didn't do what I should have done. But I don't know, I just kind of feel like you do everything that you're supposed to do. You worked hard, you gave it 100%, and it doesn't happen. To me, you didn't fail. You just didn't, maybe you didn't get the results that you wanted, but you certainly did not fail.
No, that is true. And what I'm saying is that it's one of the themes that I love to explore. I call that fail with me, but it's
Yeah,
essentially saying that there is no such thing that we should label as failure. It's just another way that didn't work. And
yeah.
thank you for showing this from your perspective. And the next thing that I want to ask you, it's kind of relates to what we just said, that we are succeeding and we're not ending up with that part as an actor. And that's something I have faced as a writer as well, that as a writer, what I'm writing or what I am projecting, yep, and I felt in a way that until your self-awareness comes whole, you cannot do that very well, you cannot do that convincingly. It's very important for you to know who you are before you can project something else as a writer. And
Yeah.
I believe that in any performing arts, that's equally true. And this is something I wanted to hear from your point of view, as because an actor is always shaping up to a different role or a different character. And Does do you think that it needs a tremendous amount of self-awareness, or how does that person can build on it? Because the job asks you to change so many times. It might be very demanding, very challenging, but then how do you keep yourself anchored and realize who you are at the core of it, and then yet you do your job well?
Yeah, and that's a very interesting question that I've never been asked before. Thank you. Well, one of the things is that it's just really important to understand who you are and try to bring in, if you can, try to bring in as many life experiences to that character, your own life experiences. Now, of course, if you're playing Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs, I don't think Anthony Hopkins had that many life experiences of eating people and being a cannibal. So for that one, that might have been a little bit of a stretch. But for a lot of characters, you can find something in yourself and connecting it with people you know in your life and family members. And there are ways of bringing in life experiences, just like, and that's why I truly don't believe that we have any competition in this world. And this holds true for writers, for any kind of artists. And I know that sometimes, like, I was guilty of this too at the beginning of my career, of competing with other people. Walk into a casting and you start looking around and you're checking out who the other people who are going to be auditioning for the same role you are. And then you start thinking, wait a minute, I've seen that guy on TV before, and I've seen that guy in a movie. It's like, what am I doing here? I don't have that kind of experience. And all of a sudden, you're just in a very different place and you're so unfocused and you are comparing yourself to other people. And I think that the quicker you stop doing that and just understand that we all bring something unique to the table. And going back to your question, finding something in your life that, and maybe you have to adapt it a little bit, maybe you need to twist it a little bit, maybe something different might have needed to be done in order for you to get to that place, but it was something kind of similar, but then the change took place. Whatever it takes, but tap into reality because that's what's going to make it much easier for you to say your lines in a believable way.
Thank you for taking that question. It was something I've always been curious about, and whenever I am trying to write something new, and this is something I learned from one of my writing classes a long time ago, that whenever you're writing, try to find that person to be like, you have to write their biodata, you have to be that person before you can write. And that's why I thought it's a very interesting area to,
So I'm curious, it's just kind of flip things around. So when you were writing a character,
yeah.
do you think of some of your life experiences, somebody you might have known that had some similar characteristics to this person?
Yes, I try to do that, and this is one of the reasons how I ended up being where I am today. So I always thought that I'll have to have some amount of life experience to be able to be a good writer, and which is where I did a lot of changes to my environments. Like, for example, I left home when I was 16, and then I was born in a small town in India, and then I jumped over to some state level colleges. Then I went to other states and lived there for a fair bit. It's a big country. It's very different living from one part to another. And then I left India, and then I lived in different parts of England for a couple of years, and then I came to Australia. But by the time I was married, so I was thinking that now I should settle down and I cannot be as experimental as I
Uh-huh.
should. But I wanted to embrace that richness of culture as you move from one place to another, interact with people, and you absorb so much when you connect with people. I think that was a big part of me being a writer.
Yeah, and all those life experiences that's giving you information to help you with different characters. Yeah, that sounds incredible.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about learning the craft and your experience and your guidance into that. We talked about your book, and I wanted to hear from you about the psychology of viewers a little bit because we are living in a constantly evolving world and we see that is changing. So being an actor, so the ultimate recognition comes from the viewers, right? So and that has evolved a lot over the span of your career as well. And I'm curious, how do you feel about that? What do you think about that?
Now, you're talking about like the viewers of movies and TV
Yes,
shows that
yes.
I've been in. I never really think about it in those terms. I really don't. I did so there was a movie that I did with Tom Hanks and it's called A Man Called Otto. And I went with my wife to watch it in the movie theaters. I I was thinking back, oh, they did have an opening in LA. And I was going to go because I was in Burbank, which is just like an hour or so away, but I was already committed to doing a workshop, so I couldn't go to the screening there. And I don't know, I kind of had mixed feelings because sometimes you just never know what gets edited out. And even though I had an important part, it certainly, I guess it could have been cut, and that would have been a feeling that wasn't so great to watch the movie and think, I just spent like 4 days here and I got cut out of this thing. But I never think of the viewers in any way. I'm just focused on what I need to do. And I think, and this kind of goes back to something that you mentioned. I think if you're thinking about the outside world and how they're seeing you and how they're viewing you, I just think that's a dangerous way to live because when I've seen people who, like I was saying before, who only feel good about themselves when people want to take selfies with you or they ask for autographs and you kind of pretend to hate that they're running over to you, even though you're really loving it. I don't know. It's like at some point, for most people, that stardom, and I'm not trying to give the impression I'm anywhere near there. I'm so far away from that world, nor do I ever want to be in that world. But if you are, if that's the only thing that's making you feel alive and feeling good, and just surrounding yourself with people who are agreeing with you and saying yes to you, that's a dangerous place to be because at some point that fame will start to drift and people are going to start thinking, oh, wait a minute, weren't you like in a TV show like 4, 10 years ago or something? I can't. And those are the people who have a really tough time handling that because they've only only felt good when things were going great. And that's why it's so important not to base anything about your self-worth on success. Because to me, it's just a dangerous way. For me, I'm in some ways I kind of see myself just as I'm a worker, like a construction worker going in, doing my job, punching in, punching out, enjoying my work, and kind of leaving it at that. It's like for me, yeah, there are a lot of people in my neighborhood. They have no idea what I do. I don't go walking around the street saying, "Hey, by the way, did you know that I was on this HBO show?" It's like it doesn't really matter. And just like somebody might be an orthopedic surgeon, uh, I'd be feeling a little weird if I said, "Oh, hi, how are you?" "Oh, yeah, I'm." I'm an orthopedic surgeon and I just got this award last. It's like, are you a nice person? Are you someone I want to talk to? Someone to be fun to hang out with? Those things really don't matter. So look, I view the acting world, it's a job. And I don't want to make it sound like it's a bad thing or it's drudgery. No, I love it's a great job. It's a job, and there are plenty of actors out there who are very well known, who are wonderful people. And there are people like in any profession who are very well known and they're horrible to be around. So it's a job.
Now, very well said. And I was kind of linking that back to what we were discussing earlier about your self-awareness and the persona that you are presenting to the world. And if you start viewing yourself in light of those acceptances, then it kind of gets very difficult, I believe, to remain
I agree.
grounded. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And my continuous curiosity on the viewership aspects of things. Do you notice a cultural shift towards more brutality and violence as opposed to nuances with all this tech and OTT platforms and everything? You have worked in films and you are in the first OTT show that Netflix created. So, how do you feel about that, this changing landscape?
Yeah, look, the industry certainly has changed a lot. I'm not so sure if it's really turned more violent. There are a lot of Marvel remakes out there, and honestly, it's just not my genre. So I can't say 100% for sure, but my guess is that Cinderella or Superman or Batman probably aren't the most violent movies coming out. And those are movies that are happening more, these remakes or second, third, fourth edition of these things. Because I remember back in the 70s, there were some pretty violent movies. So I wouldn't say from my experience that things are more violent now. I do think that people are just more exposed to violence just in general. You can watch the news. You see horrible things going on in the news. And to me, that's much scarier than on a TV show or in a movie. But one thing, and if you're just talking about differences from the past to today, I tell you, one of the things that I'm finding is that sometimes people who are starting off in the industry, they expect things to happen very quickly for them because, and I understand it, it's because that's kind of how the world has gotten. If you are on a reality show, you can get discovered overnight and all of a sudden you become very famous. Now, typically, I've also found that people who, even if you come in first place in some singing reality show, most of the time, and there are some exceptions, but most of the time, those people don't have a long career. You become very famous, or if you're on TikTok, or if you're on X or Instagram, and whatever it is, you can become very well known very quickly. That is something that's very different. In the past, people, I think, had a better understanding that to have success, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And I think that sometimes today people just expect it. And once again, I understand because that's what people are seeing, that things happen very quickly for people. But if you really, matter of fact, I'll give you an example. I was just doing extra work, and there's an actor, Kevin Costner, a lot of people know, just had tremendous success. And I remember he was hanging out with the extras. Well, it was kind of nice. We were just talking, and I didn't know this guy was just, I thought he was just getting started. He was one of the stars of this movie. And he was saying, it's really funny. People are viewing me as this superstar now because he's doing this. He's got another movie coming up. He said, people don't understand. I've been knocking around LA for 10 years now. and things are just starting to kick in for me. So here's a guy who some people might have viewed as this overnight sensation, but he put in his time and he worked incredibly hard. And that's the way most successful people are. It takes time. So I think that's also something different than in the past where people think that you're going to just get discovered and be famous overnight.
Thank you for sharing that insight. And I think in today's discussion, we have taken the conversation through a lot of areas into that covers your book and your experience, and also talks about the foundations, some of the key areas that the actors and models possibly as well should be familiar with them. And so you mentioned that you started writing the book and you constantly sort of worked on it and you created the second book,
Second edition,
second
went through
edition,
six, yeah, went through six
six
editions. Yeah,
editions,
kept.
and this is your second book. So to conclude the episode, can you tell us about what you're thinking next and what would be your sort of concluding advice to anyone who has joined us for this episode?
Yeah, so a couple things. So look, I never know when my next booking is going to happen. I'm on hold. I was offered a date, but until it happens, I'm just assuming that it's not going to happen until it actually happens because things change and things like that. One of the things that I'm also spending time with, and once again, as I've been doing this for a long time, I'm giving more and more back to the community, the acting and modeling community. And so that's why, like, for instance, for people who go to my website, howtoactandmodel.com, and I don't know, I know in Canada they spell model MODLE. I don't know what it's like in Australia, but in the States it's MODEL. So if you're trying to get to my website, it's just howtoactandmodel.com. And if you just sign up there, it's all free. I send out really helpful industry information, and I try to do it every week. I've got you can follow me on Instagram. Once again, I share videos there, and it's just Aaron, it's AARON for Robert Marcus. And I also have a YouTube channel. And the simplest way is just to go to howtoactamodel.com, click on the YouTube icon, and then that will take you there and you can subscribe. So there, I've got over 500 free quick tip videos, and it's the Actor Career Center. And so I'm spending a lot of time just helping other people learn from my experiences in the industry. I'm certainly planning on getting many more jobs in the future. I'm up to almost 1,300, like to hit 1,300 at some point soon, but you never know. So right now, that's what I'm spending a lot of time with. And I'm also doing a lot of virtual workshops. I still travel a little bit, doing in-person workshops and a lot of private virtual mentoring. And people can read all about that at my website as well. So I guess just to kind of finish with something for people to take away. Look, there are a lot of people out there who might discourage you, people who might tell you what you're thinking and wanting to do, no matter what it is. They're going to say, you're nuts. For me, I remember when I finally decided I was ready to hit the New York market and start trying to get representation in New York and start to work in New York. And I spent 4 years before I felt like I was ready for that. And I would have people tell me, Aaron, there are 10 million actors going to New York every single day. You really think they're going to need somebody, from the Washington, D.C. area? You're in a small market. There are all these famous people who are out there trying to get work. You're going to get your heart broken. It's not going to happen. Don't waste your time. And there are a lot of people who will say negative things to you. And it's essential that you filter everything that you hear because what I and once again, it took me a while to figure out. What I learned was these people weren't concerned about my mental health. What was really going on was, for whatever reason, they didn't have the courage to give it a try. And they didn't want to see anybody else succeed. It would be too painful for them. So if there's something that you want to pursue, do it in a smart way. Don't just jump in full force. Learn, take classes, study with people privately, practice, be prepared, and expect people to say that you're being outrageous and it doesn't make any sense. And maybe it doesn't. But if it's there, go after it. And if it doesn't work out for you, that's okay. Because then you did everything you possibly could, and then you can move on to something else in your life without having any regrets. And that's something I never wanted to have in my life, was having regrets and always wondering what if. So I hope that's helpful to you.
It certainly is. And thank you once again for joining me on Stories and Stanza. And to anyone listening, of course, I'll put Aaron's links into the episode description, the website, Instagram, YouTube, everything. So please make sure that you follow his work, look into his book, and of course, give this video a lot of love.
Oh, and I was just going to throw in there, and if anybody has a question for me, you have an
Yeah.
industry question, really feel free. Just once again, go to howtoactamodel.com and there's a contact tab. Just click on it. And I'm really good at trying to get back in touch with people. So if I can answer it, I'll get back to you. If I can't answer it, I'll still get back to you and say, that's a great question. I have no idea what the answer is, but feel free to use me as a resource.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much once again for your time today.
You're welcome. This was fun.